Now we're in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, chapters 37 through 39. And it's midnight, and they're in the ruined house. It's their wedding night. And on a wedding night, certain things are supposed to happen. They're not happening. They're not sleeping in the same room or the same bed. He gets off the couch that he's trying to sleep on. He's sleepwalking. Goes upstairs, and while he's going upstairs and into her room, he's saying, dead, dead, dead. He's so distressed, comes close to her, bends over her, says, dead, 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 again. And then he bends over and closes her in his arms and picks her up and says, my dearest darling Tess, so sweet, so good, so true. So in his sleepwalking, subconscious, unconscious state, he's describing her character perfectly. But when he's awake, he's not going to get it. These are terms of endearment. And she's taking heart at this. She's thinking, oh, maybe he does love me. Maybe he's overcome his problem. But again, he says, my wife, dead, dead. What does this mean? He leans her against the banister. He kisses her, clasps her, and she's pleased to think he's regarding her as his absolute possession, as his absolute love. And maybe things will be okay. But now she knows he's dreaming, and they stand on the brink of a river. He walks her, he's carrying her to the brink of a river, and the river is fairly wide, and to cross it, you have to get across a footbridge that is no more than a plank. It's got to be 6 to 8 inches wide. And he carries her across this plank and walks across it just like he's walking down a sidewalk. And while he's doing this, she's wondering, is he going to drown me? Probably he was. And she sort of figures that's what should happen. Remember, Tess believes that it's her fault this has happened. She blames herself in her hyperconscience for what's occurred. Or maybe they can drown together in the river. And the impulse stirred her to almost move her body so that she does fall in the river. But they reach the other side, and he walks with her in his arms up to the ruined abbey of an old church, into the graveyard, and he's still in a dead sleep, and he lays her in a stone coffin, and then he lays down beside the stone coffin. And Tess does not understand this at all. And then after a few minutes, Tess realizes if she lets him lay out here, he'll freeze. And so she gets up, stirs him and says, let us walk on, darling. Takes him by the hand in his unconscious state, leads him back to the house, induces him to lie down on the sofa bed, puts some wood on the fire to dry the dampness out of him. Act of love. And this all occurs at night. And the next morning, he acts as if he knows, and he doesn't know anything about what happened the night before. His brain was totally unconscious at the time. And she's trying to see if he's going to remember anything about it, and he doesn't. At breakfast, he's weary. She wants to reveal it to him, but she doesn't. She doesn't want to tell him what happened last night. Maybe he'll have a faint recollection, but he doesn't. He orders a carriage. Every time there's a carriage in this book, there's a problem. He says he wants to go visit Talbothays to sew up his business with Mr. and Mrs. Crick. Okay, so he does. And she has to go with him. She has to return to Talbothays. And not ready, but the girls there, they make sly remarks, you've slept together, ta-da-da-da. And all those remarks really hurt her because that's not what happened. And she has to hear in detail what happened to Marion and what happened to Reddy. Reddy tried to commit suicide. Marion's an alcoholic. And she fears they will come to no good. She goes to say goodbye to all her favorite cows. And then she's talking to Angel, and it's like they're in this dream. He stops the carriage midway on the road, asks her to take a walk with him for a few steps, And this is where the separation is going to occur. And he's going to determine how it's going to go. She will try to endure it. Tess can endure just about anything. But why should she have to endure this? He can't regard her in any other light than that of one who had practiced gross deceit upon him. Now, my anger at him is mounting. He is incredibly self-centered. He cannot consider her feelings at all. It's she's deceived him, she's hurt him, he's embarrassed. He could care less about her feelings. Remember, she's just a dairymaid. May I write to you, she asks. Oh yes, if you are ill or want anything at all. Well, what she wants is a marriage with him that's normal. She just picked the wrong guy. She doesn't have enough strength, however, to argue with him or put him in his place or make him snap out of it. He probably would have not withstood her, but her mood of long suffering makes it easy for him. She believes that it's her fault. And because she believes that, he can do this. He hands her a packet of money, a bribe. Is he paying her off to get rid of her? Walks her back to the carriage, bids goodbye to her, and the chapter ends with Hardy writing, God's not in his heaven. All's wrong with the world. Well, in this world, in this marriage, everything is wrong. And he's the one who's done it all. We are now in chapter 38. Her thought is, how am I going to face my parents? And she gets to Marlet, and there's a strange person who runs the turnpike. He opens the gates so that you have to pay him to walk down the road. And the turnpike keeper, she talks to him. Yeah, is there any news? Well, the news is what she doesn't want to hear. John Derbyfield had a daughter who married a gentleman farmer who's well off, of high standing, and on the day of the wedding, he spent a lot of time celebrating, drinking, and he kept up the wedding day by treating everybody in the parish, which means he was down at Rolliver's and he bought everybody a drink, and he probably had quite a few himself. Tess is sick at heart. She tries to get into the village by a back lane, and she asks herself, how can I enter this house? And so she does enter the house. A girl sees her, though. She doesn't go unobserved, and asks that question, where's thy gentleman, Tess? It hurts. She has to come up with a quick explanation. And so here's Joan Derbyfield, the mother who did not tell her what she should have told her about men. Again, we are asking that question. When you've gone out into the world and it doesn't go so well, and you go home to try to regroup, you hope you get some compassion, some comfort, some encouragement. Here we go, Joan Derbyfield. I thought you was married. I am married. He's gone away from me. Nation sees such husbands as you seem to get, say I. Oh, you little fool, you little fool. The last thing, how cruel is this? This is the last thing Tess needs to hear. Her mother calling her an idiot and a fool. I could not help it. He was so good, and I felt the wickedness of trying to blind him. And her mother really gets on her case when she reveals that she told him the truth. Remember, Joan's advice was, no, don't tell him anything. Just conceal it. That's where my misery do lie. My children, my bringing forth, should be such bigger simpletons. He's calling her an idiot. You fool, you idiot. To blab such a thing. And your father's down at Rolliver's bragging about the wedding. And he's been bragging about it every day, about his family is going to get back in its right position through you, and it's not going to happen. And how's he supposed to explain that to his drinking buddies? No, don't consider Tess's feelings, Joan. Just think about your drunken husband's feelings while he gets drunk down there at Rolliver's or wherever he's getting loaded. And so Tess goes upstairs and she realizes she can't stay at home. This is no place for her. And Jack Derbyfield has sold his second horse. I wonder what he used the money for. And he's now on foot with his peddling business, and he's doing even worse than he was before. And he's been talking about how they used to be called Sir, his ancestors. Well, he's not Sir Jack Derbyfield, that's for sure. And so he's stunned and worried about how he's going to be embarrassed. So Tess can't bear to hear any more. How unexpected were the attacks of destiny. And if her father doubted her a little, would not strangers and acquaintances doubt her much? She could not live long at home. She can't stay here. The first one place you should be able to go to after a catastrophe, and she can't stay there. She gets a note from Claire. He's in the north of England. Too bad he doesn't just stay there. And uses the letter as a reason to get out of the house and take off. She's got to go somewhere. She's got to leave. Chapter 39. Tess goes home. Angel goes home. Okay. Finds himself descending the hill to Emminster Vicarage. The picture of life had changed for him. Now he thought he knew it as a practical man, but perhaps he did not. He is mechanically attempting to pursue his agricultural plans. His heart was troubled. He's perturbed. His mood is transmuted into a dogged indifference. He's looking at his own existence with the passive interest of an outsider. He's embittered by the conviction that all this desolation had been brought about by the accident of her being at D'Urberville. How self-centered can you get? Don't consider her feelings. Don't consider the fact that you've abandoned her and left her. Just consider how you're hurt because of your goofy prejudices about old families. The rebel, remember, turns out to be way more conservative than we thought he would be. Why had he not stoically abandoned her in fidelity to his principles? He doesn't have principles. He's got biases. Wondered if he had treated her unfairly. He has. He perceived how intimately the notion of having Tess as a dear possession was mixed up with all of his schemes and words and ways, and she would be a dear possession. And now this guy who, I'm sorry to have to say this, has cement for brains, has decided that he's going to go try his farming thing in Brazil. Brazil, okay. Because there's land there. Okay. Returning to disclose his plans to his parents. And he's not giving them any warning as usual. Remember, they didn't get invited to the wedding. And so there he is. And his mother asks the most obvious question, the one that he should answer. Where's your wife, Angel? Where's your dear wife? And he doesn't have an answer for that because his dear wife is somewhere else. Let me pet my cat a little. Okay. That's a good girl. All right. And then he announces, I've decided to go to Brazil. And they're stunned. In the space of 30 minutes, they are stunned twice. They don't get to see their daughter-in-law, and now their son's going to go to Brazil. And they are worried about this, and they're hurt. Why? Well, Brazil is a few thousand miles away, and there are no jet planes, and they don't have cell phones. They can't do Skype. So if he goes to Brazil, it is as if they will never see him again, but he does not stop to think about this. And they can't understand why his wife isn't with him. And then he says this, I always meant to keep her away from this house till I should feel she could come with credit to you. Come with credit to you. What is wrong with her that you can't show her as she is? They would have recognized her for who she was, but he thinks she's got to bring credit. His original plan was to refrain from bringing her there, not to wound their prejudices. He's projecting his own stuff onto them. They are the most basic, nicest people you're ever going to meet. They would welcome her with open arms. They don't care if she's a dairy maid or farm girl or whatever she is. They'd see her beauty. And so his mother begins to question him, and her questions are perceptibly pointed. I am sure she is very pretty. Yes, she is. And pure, virtuous. Well, yeah, she is. Despite what happened to her, she is still a virtuous person, and she's a pure person. But the question, were you her first love, really bothers him. He thinks because she had sex with Alec D'Urberville that he's not her first love, he's her second. No, he is her first love because she feels love for him. But he overlooks that. And now it's time to pray. In the Clare household, time to read the Bible and pray. And we read the 31st proverb, a chapter that praises the virtuous wife. Her price is far above rubies. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. And Angel's throat is tightening, and he's starting to feel sad. She is a perfect woman, his mother says. She's a working woman. She used her hands and her head and her heart for the good of others. Since she is pure and chaste, she would have been refined enough for me. And he knows this, and he starts to cry. Well, go ahead, angel, cry me a Nile River. His mother says, you don't seem to be yourself. And he can't explain what is wrong. And then his mother asks, well, is she a young woman whose history will bear investigation? And the answer is yes. She hasn't done anything bad. She was assaulted by a jerk. That's not her fault. And then he replies, and his reply is amazing. She is spotless. Again, he says things about her that are utterly true, but he will not get them. He will not acknowledge that they're true. Then never mind the rest. And so it is that incensed with his poor wife, and when his agitation had cooled, he would be at moments incensed with his poor wife for causing a situation in which he was obliged to practice deception on his parents. Self-centered again, does not consider Tess's feelings or her whereabouts at all, just what's wrong with him. Oddly enough, it's time for Hardy to say what he says. This is a guy who rebels because he thinks he's being original and different and unconventional. But he's as conventional and customary and conservative as the next conservative. He's got a bias about old aristocratic families, and that comes from him. He's not a rebel at all. He's just pretending to be one. And that is the end of this reading segment. Chapters 37 to 39.